It all started on a day that should have been the happiest of my life. I had just given birth to my beautiful baby, and everything felt perfect. But that perfect moment quickly turned into my worst nightmare. I walked into the hospital nursery to see my newborn, only to find the crib empty. Panic struck, and the world seemed to stop. My baby, my flesh and blood, was gone. And the worst part? The person who took her wasn't a stranger, but someone I thought I could trust. She was a woman from the HOA, someone who had always acted like she was looking out for us. But what I didn't know was that she had a dark side, one that would stop at nothing to take what she wanted, even if it meant tearing apart my family. What happened next left everyone in shock. Before I tell you how it all unfolded, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching from? Drop your city's name in the comments below and let me know. It's crazy how something like this can happen anywhere, even in the most trusting communities. And believe me, it was happening right under our noses. It all started like any other day in the hospital, or so I thought. The joy of bringing my newborn into the world should have been a moment of pure happiness and love. But instead, that moment turned into something I could never have imagined. My husband and I had just settled into our room, gazing at our beautiful baby girl, so small, so perfect. Everything seemed like it was falling into place, and I couldn't have asked for anything more. But then the unthinkable happened. I went to check on her in the nursery, expecting to see her peacefully sleeping in her little crib. But to my horror, when I walked into the room, the crib was empty. My baby was gone. My heart stopped. Panic surged through me as I rushed to the nurses, but no one seemed to know anything. The hospital staff immediately went into action, but the hours that followed felt like a lifetime. What I couldn't have known then was that this was no random act of violence. The person who had taken my newborn wasn't a stranger. She wasn't even someone we had just met. She was someone from our own community, someone I'd trusted, a woman from the HOA who had wormed her way into our lives with a smile and empty promises. Asterisk, what she did next shocked everyone and forever changed the way I viewed the people around me. The sun was just beginning to set that evening, casting a soft glow over the hospital room where my husband and I sat, filled with a mixture of exhaustion and elation. Our daughter, our firstborn, had just entered the world. It was supposed to be the happiest day of our lives, and in many ways it was. We were finally parents. Our dream had come true. But little did I know that perfect moment, that moment I had dreamed of for so long, would soon be shattered in a way I never could have prepared for. After the delivery, I remember the overwhelming rush of emotions, the pain of labor quickly fading, replaced by the pure joy of holding my newborn daughter. Her tiny fingers curled around mine as she rested peacefully in my arms. My husband, Adam, sat beside me, beaming with pride. We spent the first few hours marveling at the miracle we had created, whispering sweet nothings to our little girl. Everything felt perfect. It felt like this was our moment, the beginning of something beautiful. The hospital staff came in and out, checking on us, offering advice and encouragement. Nurses came to take the baby for her first bath and routine checks, but they promised it would only be for a few minutes. Adam and I were alone in the room, allowing ourselves to relish the peace of it all. We exchanged a quiet smile, knowing this was the start of a new chapter for our family. I was tired, but I couldn't shake the excitement bubbling inside me. Being a new mom felt surreal. I was completely in awe of this tiny person who was now part of my life. I had spent 9 months imagining this day, planning for it, and now that it was finally here, it felt like a dream. Nothing could possibly ruin this day, right? The minutes stretched into hours. I kept glancing at the clock on the wall, my mind constantly jumping between the joy of holding my daughter and the exhaustion that kept pulling at me. I didn't realize how tired I was until Adam suggested I take a nap. He had already been awake with me for hours, his own exhaustion catching up to him. "I'll go check on her," he offered. "You get some rest. I'll be right back." It was a simple enough offer. I was grateful. I closed my eyes for just a few moments, thinking that I would be able to relax while he stepped out. But when I opened my eyes, I had no idea that everything was about to change. I heard the soft rustle of footsteps in the hall and looked up, expecting Adam to return with our daughter in his arms. But to my surprise, the door swung open, and a nurse entered alone. She wasn't carrying the baby. My heart leapt in my chest as confusion crept in. "Excuse me," I said, my voice thick with worry. "Where's my baby?" The nurse glanced at me, her face tense. She hesitated before speaking, a tightness in her voice that I didn't quite understand at the time. "Your daughter's not in her crib. We're doing everything we can to find her. Please stay calm." I couldn't comprehend what she was saying. Not in her crib? My baby, the one I had carried for 9 months, the one I had waited for my whole life, was gone? I bolted upright, ignoring the exhaustion and the pain in my body. My heart pounded so loudly, I could feel it in my throat. I didn't even hear what the nurse said next. All I could think was, my baby is missing? How is this even possible? My mind raced, and in that split second, 1,000 thoughts went through my head. I imagined the worst, the unthinkable. Someone had taken her. My baby was gone. The nurse rushed out of the room, calling for security. I grabbed my phone and called, Adam in a panic. "Where are you? What's going on?" I asked, my voice shaking. "I'm on my way back to the room. What's wrong?" His voice was calm, but there was an edge of concern. "Adam, they've taken her. My baby's gone." I couldn't contain the tears that started streaming down my face. I could hear his breath catch on the other end of the line. "What do you mean, gone?" He was suddenly there, in the doorway, his eyes wide with disbelief. "What do you mean? They're saying she's missing?" I nodded, still in shock. "Yes, the nurse just told me. They don't know where she is. They're looking for her right now." In that moment, I felt a deep, sinking dread take hold of me. I had been in a hospital, surrounded by people who were supposed to protect us, supposed to keep us safe. How could this happen here? How could my baby, who had just been in my arms, suddenly be gone? Seconds later, security flooded the hallway, and the frantic search began. But no one could give me any answers. There was a flurry of activity. Nurses were rushing around, security was combing every inch of the building, and doctors were trying to stay calm. But I could tell that the fear was contagious. I could feel it in the air. The minutes dragged on like hours. My heart was in my throat, and my mind raced with 1,000 worst-case scenarios. The hospital staff tried to reassure me, but I could tell they were just as scared as I was. The building was locked down, and no one was allowed in or out until the baby was found, but still no one knew anything. I remember the sinking feeling in my stomach as I sat there, helpless. The longer we waited, the more I feared that something had gone terribly wrong. And then, just when I thought I might lose hope, I saw something that I will never forget. A woman stepped into the hallway. At first, I didn't recognize her. She was older, with short, bleach blonde hair, wearing a hospital ID badge around her neck. But there was something about her, something that made my skin crawl. She walked with a purpose, and when she caught my eye, she smiled. It was a smile that was both reassuring and unsettling at the same time. "Hello," she said, her voice too calm, too friendly. "I'm Karen from HOA. I'm here to help you." The HOA? What was she doing here? I didn't know her. Why would she be involved in this? Before I could even process her words, she walked past me, down the hallway, and into the security office. I never thought I'd see her again. But as it turns out, she was far more involved than I ever could have imagined. The seconds turned into minutes, and those minutes seemed like an eternity. As the initial shock began to wear off, I found myself caught in a wave of frantic questions. What was happening? Who had taken my baby? How could something like this happen in a place that was supposed to keep us safe? My body was on high alert, each beat of my heart a loud reminder of how utterly powerless I felt. Adam was still standing next to me, frozen. His face had gone pale, and I could see his jaw tightening with every passing second. He paced the room, muttering under his breath, asking the same questions I had asked. But no one had answers. No one could explain how my baby, just a few hours old, could vanish without anyone noticing. I don't remember much of what happened in those first few minutes, but I do remember the panic rising inside me like a tidal wave. I remember the nurses and doctors rushing in and out, their footsteps echoing down the hallway. But it all felt so distant, like I was watching everything unfold from behind a foggy window. My mind was racing, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't piece things together. Where was she? What was happening? Who had taken her? A nurse finally came into the room and tried to explain the situation. Her voice was soft but firm, attempting to calm us down. "We have a team searching the entire hospital," she said. "We've locked down all exits. No one's leaving until we find your baby." I nodded, trying to process what she was saying, but all I could think of was my baby, my tiny girl, alone somewhere in that building. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. My chest felt tight, and my hands were shaking uncontrollably. Adam kept telling me to breathe, to focus. But nothing felt real. It was as if I had stepped into a nightmare, one I couldn't wake up from. The nurse left to update security, and I looked over at Adam. His eyes were wide with a mix of fear and frustration. He wanted to do something, anything to fix this, but we were powerless. Hours passed, but it felt like time had come to a standstill. We were trapped in a loop of helplessness. Nurses and security officers continued to run through the halls, their faces tense and filled with concern. But none of them were saying anything that would give us hope. We were growing desperate. I could feel my sanity slipping away with every minute that passed. I had to know where my baby was, and I had to know now. I turned to Adam, my voice a whisper. What if they never find her? What if something's happened to her? The words hung in the air like a heavy weight, and the fear I felt was too much to bear. Adam shook his head, his eyes dark with the same terror. They'll find her. They have to find her. This can't be happening. She's just a baby. She's innocent. He seemed to be trying to convince himself just as much as me, but I could see the doubt creeping into his own thoughts. That's when I heard it, the sound of footsteps rushing down the hall. My heart skipped a beat, and I nearly leaped out of my seat in anticipation. Had they found her? Were they coming with her? But it wasn't the police or any of the hospital staff. No, it was her. The woman I had seen earlier, the one with the bleach blonde hair and the strange smile, Karen. At first, I didn't realize it was her, but as she walked past the door to our room, I froze. There was something in her presence that made my stomach twist. She wasn't just a stranger to me. In the back of my mind, I had a nagging feeling that I'd seen her before. But where? Why was she here? She stopped in front of our room and looked directly at me. Her smile, that smile that had seemed so innocent when she first walked past, now seemed like something darker. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice too sweet, too calm. "I'm so sorry to hear about what happened. I'm with the HOA, and I just wanted to check in. I know this must be so difficult for you." I looked at her, confused. "The HOA? Why are you here?" Karen's eyes flicked toward the door. "I'm just trying to help. We all know how stressful it can be to have a new baby, and I've been through it. I just wanted to make sure you're doing okay. If you need anything at all, I'm here to help." There was something about her that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. My instincts screamed at me to be cautious, but I couldn't place why. She wasn't being overtly suspicious, she was simply too friendly, too eager to help, as though she were forcing herself into a situation where she didn't belong. Adam spoke up, clearly irritated. "We're fine, thank you. Can we focus on finding our baby, though?" Karen's smile faltered for just a second, but then she nodded, as if nothing had happened. Of course," she said, backing away from the door. "I'll be right outside if you need anything." And just like that, she was gone. But as soon as she left, something inside me felt even more wrong. My gut was telling me that this woman had no business being here, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized just how strange her presence had been. Why would she come in here now at a time like this? I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. I had to find out who she really was. The search for my baby continued as the hours dragged on, but each passing minute seemed to make the situation feel more dire. The tension in the hospital was palpable. No one had any answers, and security wasn't saying anything. What if she was involved somehow? What if Karen knew something about this? I couldn't shake the feeling that Karen wasn't just an innocent bystander, and as I thought back to her strange visit earlier, a horrifying realization began to form in my mind. What if she was the one who had taken my baby? I had no more. I had to find out everything I could about her before it was too late. The minutes that stretched into hours felt like a lifetime. I sat in that sterile hospital room, staring at the empty crib, my eyes never leaving it. My thoughts kept racing. Where was she? Who took her? How could this be happening? Adam paced restlessly, his steps quick and uneven. He hadn't said much since Karen left the room, but I could see the same growing dread in his eyes that I felt inside myself. His fists clenched and unclenched, his movements jerky. He was just as helpless as I was, but I could tell that the thought of doing nothing was driving him mad. He wanted to go out and search the entire hospital. He wanted answers. Anything to bring our baby back. But all we could do was wait. The hospital had initiated a full lockdown. No one could leave, and no one could come in without proper identification. Security had begun to search the building, checking every room, every hallway, and every floor. The building wasn't small, there were multiple wings, and it felt like an endless labyrinth. But even with all the security measures, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were losing time. What if the woman had already left? What if she was already too far ahead of us? A nurse entered the room, her expression somber. "We've got the building locked down tight," she said. "We're doing everything we can to find your baby. Please try to stay calm. We're on it." Stay calm? How could I stay calm when my baby was out there, lost in a building I trusted to protect us? How could I be calm when I didn't know where she was, or who had her? I nodded, but I wasn't calm. I was desperate. Every minute that passed without news was a minute I felt I was losing more of my sanity. I glanced at the clock on the wall, but the hands seemed to mock me. It had been almost 3 hours, and there was still no sign of my baby. The door opened again, and I looked up, expecting to see more hospital staff. But instead it was Officer Davis, the police officer who had arrived earlier to take our statement. His face was tight with concern, and his voice was low when he spoke. "I'm going to need you both to come with me. We've got some information." The way he said it, the urgency in his voice, sent a chill down my spine. I grabbed Adam's hand, and we followed the officer down the hallway, not knowing what to expect. We were led to a small conference room. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sterile glow over the room. A few officers were gathered around a table, their expressions grim. One of them looked up as we entered. It was Officer Davis again. He motioned for us to sit down. "I know this is difficult," he began, his voice measured, "but we need to talk about the woman who took your baby. We've learned a few things that might help us find her." I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, and Adam gripped my hand even tighter. "What did you find?" I asked, barely able to get the words out. "Who is she?" The officer cleared his throat. "Her name is Karen White. She's a member of the Homeowners Association in the area, but what's more concerning is that she's had a history of attempting to intervene in other families' lives. She's got a reputation for getting involved in things that she shouldn't. In fact, we've already looked into some past reports. She's been linked to several incidents where she tried to control situations involving new parents and babies. There are suspicions, but nothing concrete, until now." My blood ran cold. This woman, this Karen, was no stranger. She had been targeting new families, manipulating situations to insert herself where she didn't belong. And now she had taken our baby. I looked over at Adam. He was as stunned as I was, his face pale, as the reality of it all began to sink in. "So, she's done this before?" he asked, his voice almost a whisper. The officer nodded. "Yes, but it's more than just that. Karen has a history of trying to gain control of families, especially new parents. She'll show up, offer help, and make herself indispensable. She's gotten people to trust her, then tries to take over their lives in ways that are more than just offering advice. We've been monitoring her for a while. But this, he paused, glancing at the other officers. This is beyond what we've seen. I felt a wave of nausea hit me. Karen had been in my life, in my home, offering her help, pretending to be someone I could trust. But now it was clear. Her intentions had never been pure. She wasn't just a concerned neighbor. She was obsessed with taking control, taking what wasn't hers. And now she had my daughter. We have her ID badge, Officer Davis continued. We've already traced it back to the hospital. She wasn't on the authorized list for anyone coming to check on your baby, but she still got through the system somehow. The hospital is looking into how she was able to get in unnoticed. I could feel my breath catch in my throat. What do we do now? I asked, desperate for action. How do we get her back? We've got a team following up on leads, the officer replied. But we need your help. Do you remember anything else about her? Anything that might help us track her down? I thought back to everything I could remember about Karen. Her face, her smile, her calm demeanor that hid something darker. But there was one thing that stood out more than anything else. Her presence felt off. She wasn't just trying to help, she was inserting herself into every part of our lives. She was controlling. It was like she wanted to take over, and now it seemed like she had taken the ultimate step in trying to claim what wasn't hers. She's been around a lot, I said, trying to recall the times she had come to visit. She's always been in the background, acting like she was there to help. She's always been nice, but there's something about her, something that made me feel like she wanted more. I don't know how to explain it. She wanted to own this family. The officer listened intently, nodding. That's helpful. We've been gathering as much as we can. Don't worry, we're going to find your baby. But even as he spoke those words, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread creeping in. Where was she now? Was Karen hiding out somewhere with my baby in her arms? The longer this dragged on, the more likely it seemed that Karen had planned this out carefully, and every passing minute was another step further from getting my daughter back. We left the room, but it felt like no matter how hard I tried, the world was spinning too fast. The hospital had become a maze full of uncertainty and fear. Every shadow seemed to hide something, and every corner felt like it might bring us face to face with our worst nightmare. I just wanted to hold my baby. I just wanted to make sure she was safe. As we walked down the hall, the weight of the situation settled into my chest. It wasn't just about finding my baby anymore. It was about stopping Karen, stopping her from doing this to anyone else. But for now, we had no choice but to wait and pray that our baby was safe. And I could only hope that the hospital and the police were right, that they would find her before it was too late. The hours that followed in the aftermath of Karen's disappearance with my baby were a blur of confusion, fear, and anxiety. We were trapped in a state of limbo, knowing that every moment counted, yet helpless in our inability to do anything directly. The hospital had tightened security even more, and the police had gone into full investigative mode, but there was still no sign of my daughter, and the absence of news was deafening. It was well into the night when the phone rang. The sound of it broke the silence like a crack of thunder. I glanced at Adam, who was asleep in a chair beside me, his exhaustion obvious. He had barely slept the past 24 hours, consumed by the search, but I had remained too alert, too fearful to close my eyes. I grabbed the phone, heart pounding, half expecting to hear news that would either break me or offer a glimmer of hope. "Hello," I said, my voice cracking. "Mrs. Andrews?" A male voice on the other end. It was Officer Davis again. "Did you find her?" I asked, breathless with anticipation. "I'm afraid we haven't located her yet," he replied, his voice low. "But we've found something important, something that might explain more about Karen." My stomach sank. The dread I had been feeling for hours intensified. "What is it? What did you find?" "Karen White, the woman who took your baby. She's been on our radar for a while now. It's more than just a random kidnapping. This is part of a pattern, and it's darker than we realized." My mind raced as I listened. I had known there was something off about Karen. The way she inserted herself into our lives, the odd way she seemed too perfect, too interested in our baby. It had all seemed strange to me from the beginning. But this? I hadn't expected this level of depravity. What do you mean darker? I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. She's not just a well-meaning but overzealous neighbor, Officer Davis continued. She's been using her position in the homeowners association to manipulate families. She's been attempting to control new parents, offering unsolicited advice, showing up uninvited, and essentially pushing herself into their lives. But this isn't just about wanting to help. I could hear the tension in his voice as he paused. We've found evidence that suggests she's been trying to take babies. Not just yours. There have been other reports, small incidents, mostly dismissed as overreaction, but when we piece things together, it became clear Karen has been targeting families for years. My heart pounded louder in my chest. This couldn't be real. I had trusted her. She was part of the HOA, someone I thought I knew, someone I thought was safe. I don't understand. I whispered, my voice barely audible. Why? Why would she do something like this? The officer's next words sent a chill down my spine. She has an unhealthy obsession with family dynamics. She believes she can be the perfect mother, and in her mind, that means taking control of every family she encounters. She targets vulnerable new parents, especially those with newborns, and tries to insert herself into their lives, offering her guidance. But in reality, she's been using these families as a way to create the perfect home life she's always dreamed of, even if it means taking someone else's child. The officer's words were a stark wake-up call. Karen wasn't just a woman with too much time on her hands. She wasn't some overbearing neighbor who wanted to help. She was obsessed, consumed by the need to control, to create the perfect image of what a family should look like, even if it meant kidnapping a child to fill the role. My mind reeled as I processed this new information. I had trusted her. I had let her into our lives, let her into our home, and she had wormed her way into my good graces. But behind her polite smile and helpful advice, there had always been something off, something I couldn't place at the time. Now, everything was starting to make sense. Is there anything we can do? I asked, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on me. Anything to help find her? To bring my baby home? The officer hesitated for a moment, then replied, We're tracking down leads. We believe Karen's hiding out somewhere, possibly with your daughter. She's planned this carefully, and we're doing everything we can to locate her. But we need you to be ready for anything. This isn't just about finding your baby anymore. This is about stopping her before she can hurt anyone else. I hung up the phone, my hands trembling. The world had suddenly become darker, scarier. What had started as a simple visit from a seemingly well-meaning neighbor had spiraled into a nightmare of unimaginable proportions. Adam stirred in the chair, his eyes fluttering open. He sat up quickly, his gaze fixed on me. What did he say? He asked, his voice tight with worry. I swallowed hard, struggling to keep the tears at bay. Karen, she's been targeting families for years. She's been trying to take babies. It's not just us. She's done this before. Adam's face went pale as he processed the information. No, this can't be happening. His voice cracked, and I could see the agony in his eyes. We trusted her. I can't believe this. How could she do this? I shook my head, unable to find the words. The betrayal ran deeper than I had ever expected. The woman we had let into our lives, into our home, was a predator who had been lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. I thought back to everything she had done. The times she had shown up unannounced at our house. The constant phone calls, the unsolicited advice. She had never really been trying to help. She had been trying to control, trying to insert herself into our lives in a way that felt too much. I had just never understood it at the time. There was one moment that stood out more than any other. It was a few weeks before the birth, when Karen had casually mentioned that she'd had a special connection with all the new mothers in the neighborhood. I had laughed it off at the time, thinking she was just being overly friendly. But now that comment made my skin crawl. She had been playing a game, and we had been nothing more than pawns in it. We couldn't let this go on. We couldn't let her hurt anyone else. We had to find her before it was too late. And as the hours ticked by, I made a silent promise to myself. I would do whatever it took to get my baby back. Whatever it took. The morning after the phone call with Officer Davis felt surreal. I couldn't shake the feeling that time was slipping away from us, that every moment spent without a lead, without my baby, was one more moment too late. The weight of the unknown was crushing. Karen had been planning this for so long, and now she had my daughter. Every part of me screamed for action. We had to find her. We had to stop her. I couldn't sit still. The hospital had doubled down on their security, but that didn't feel like enough. The sense of helplessness hung in the air, suffocating me. Adam had barely slept the night before. His eyes were red, his face gaunt from lack of rest. But I could see in his expression that, just like me, he was done waiting. It was time to act. Officer Davis and the team had been tracking Karen's movements for hours, following any and all leads that could lead them to her. But every time they thought they were close, she vanished again, like a ghost slipping through their fingers. And then came the call. "We think we've found her," Officer Davis said, his voice tight. "We have reason to believe she's holed up in a house on the outskirts of town. We're moving in now." My heart skipped a beat. This was it. We were going to find her. But my fear grew alongside my hope. What if she had my baby with her? What if she was ready for a fight? I looked at Adam, who was already moving toward the door, grabbing his jacket. His jaw was set in determination, the anger and fear from the past 24 hours fueling his every step. "We're going," he said, his voice steady but strained. I nodded, the urgency inside me pushing me forward. "We have to hurry." The drive to the house was the longest of my life. Every second felt like a lifetime as we sped toward the location. I couldn't stop imagining Karen alone with my baby, keeping her locked away, somewhere, hiding in some corner of the world that I didn't know. My hands gripped the seat, the knots in my stomach tight. As we neared the house, I saw a team of officers gathered at the edge of a property that looked isolated from the rest of the town. It was a large house, tucked back in the woods, the kind of place that felt hidden and out of reach. But it didn't look like a home. It looked like a fortress, as though Karen had prepared for something like this. She had always been one step ahead of us. The fear gnawing at me only intensified. We parked the car quickly and got out, walking toward the officers. Officer Davis, a grim look on his face, met us at the gate. "You need to stay back," he warned, his tone serious. "We don't know if she's inside, but we're going in." "I'm not staying back," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "That's my baby in there. I'm going in with you." Adam didn't say anything, but the look he gave me told me he understood. He was right there with me, ready to face whatever came next. The officers exchanged a brief glance, and then one of them nodded. "Okay, but stay close. This is dangerous." We followed them up the gravel driveway, each step taking us closer to the house. I could hear the pounding of my own heartbeat, could feel the tension in the air. My entire body was on high alert. My mind kept racing. What was she planning? Why had she taken my baby? Was she trying to create some twisted version of a perfect family? We reached the front door, and the officers signaled for us to stop. "We're going in now," Officer Davis said. "Get ready." I could hear faint noises from inside the house, footsteps, hushed voices. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I could feel the tension building to a breaking point. Was Karen in there? Was my baby with her? The door burst open with a loud bang, and the officers flooded in, guns drawn, their voices sharp as they shouted for Karen to show herself. There was a beat of silence, then a muffled cry from the back of the house. My heart stopped. That cry, it was unmistakable. It was my baby. Without thinking, I bolted forward, pushing past the officers. I heard Adam's voice shouting my name, but I didn't stop. I had to get to her. The sound of my footsteps echoed through the hallway as I rushed toward the source of the cry. The door at the end of the hall was cracked open, and I could see the outline of a figure standing inside. As I reached the door, I froze. There, standing in the middle of the room, was Karen, She was holding my daughter in her arms, cradling her close like a mother would, but her face wasn't soft with affection. It was cold, calculating. She looked up as I stepped into the doorway, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. "You," I whisper, my voice hoarse. "What have you done to her?" Karen smiled, but it wasn't a smile of kindness. It was a smile that made my skin crawl. "I'm just giving her a better life than you could ever provide." My blood ran cold. I could hear my baby's soft cries, but I couldn't bring myself to move. My whole world was standing right there in front of me, but I couldn't get to her. "I don't want to hurt her," Karen continued, her voice eerily calm. "But you're not fit to be her mother. I can give her everything she deserves." The words hit me like a slap in the face. It was as though Karen was speaking from another reality, one where she believed she had a right to my daughter. But it was clear to me now. This had never been about helping anyone. It had never been about offering advice or support. This had always been about control. "You're sick," I said, the words choking in my throat. "You can't just take her from me." Karen's eyes narrowed. "I can do whatever I want. You should have stayed out of my way." Before I could react, she took a step back, her grip tightening on my daughter. She moved toward the far corner of the room, and I could see the desperation in her eyes. She wasn't just trying to protect herself. She was trying to manipulate the situation, trying to hold my baby hostage. It was then that I saw the officer behind me, his gun trained on Karen. "Drop the baby," he commanded. "Now." But Karen was unpredictable. She wasn't going to surrender without a fight. In one swift motion, she turned, attempting to push my daughter away from her chest and use her as a shield. "Stay back," she screamed, her voice frantic. I couldn't let her get away. Not after everything. Not when my daughter was right there. Without thinking, I moved forward, my arms outstretched. Everything else faded away. The only thing that mattered was getting to my baby. Then, in the chaos that followed, the officers moved in, and Karen was finally subdued. As she was restrained, I rushed forward, collapsing to my knees when I finally reached my daughter. She was okay. She was scared, but she was alive. I held her in my arms, never wanting to let her go again. The nightmare was over. For now. The hospital room was a stark contrast to what it had been just a day ago, where once there had been frantic searches, loud voices, and the cold dread of the unknown. Now there was quiet. The room felt almost too calm, too still. I held my daughter in my arms, her small, fragile form nestled against my chest. She was safe. She was home. And yet, the weight of everything that had happened still lingered, heavy and suffocating. The police had removed Karen from a house hours ago. Her arrest had been swift after the confrontation, but the damage she had done, both to my family and to herself, was irreversible. She was no longer the woman I had trusted, the neighbor who had promised to help. She was nothing more than a criminal obsessed with taking what wasn't hers. What had once seemed like an innocent desire to offer guidance had turned into a twisted, dark obsession that left scars that couldn't easily be healed. I sat on the bed, gently rocking my daughter in my arms. Her eyes were closed, but I knew she could sense the relief in my voice when I whispered to her, "You're safe now, my sweet girl." Her tiny fingers wrapped around mine, and it felt like the world had, for the briefest of moments, returned to normal. But normal was something we would never fully have again. Adam sat beside me, his hand resting on my shoulder. He hadn't said much in the past few hours. We were both exhausted, emotionally and physically drained from everything we'd been through. But every now and then, I could feel him squeeze my hand or give me a brief look of reassurance. There were no words to describe how we both felt, just the weight of the experience that seemed to hover over us, a constant reminder of what we had nearly lost. In the aftermath, the authorities had done everything they could to piece together the details of Karen's actions. They had combed through her past, reaching out to other families that had been targeted by her. Karen had kept a detailed journal documenting her manipulations, her obsession with becoming the perfect mother, and her plans to take children from other families. It was chilling to see the lengths she had gone to in order to insert herself into the lives of others. She had become more than just a part of the community. She had set herself up as an invisible force, a shadow that lingered in the background, ready to strike when no one was looking. For months, she had used the guise of help to gain trust, and for a time, she had succeeded. But this time, she had gone too far. She had taken my baby, and that was a line no one could ignore. As much as the police had warned us that this wasn't the first time she'd tried something like this, it didn't make it easier to process. How had we let this happen? How had we been so blind? How could we have known? Adam had asked me earlier, his voice full of frustration. She was so normal. She just wanted to help. She acted like she cared about us. I had no answer. There was nothing I could say to make sense of what had happened, no simple explanation to offer that would ease the pain or the guilt. It had been an impossible situation, one we never saw coming. It wasn't just the abduction that haunted me, it was the realization that someone who had been so close to us had been capable of something so sinister. Karen wasn't just a stranger. She was someone from our community, someone we trusted, and now she was behind bars, her plan foiled. But that sense of violation would never leave us. I looked down at my daughter, feeling a knot tighten in my chest. She was safe. That's all that mattered. But even in that safety, I couldn't ignore the haunting images that would stay with me. Karen's smile, cold and calculating, her fingers tightening around my baby, the desperation in her eyes when she tried to use my daughter as a shield. I kissed the top of my daughter's head and then turned to Adam, my voice barely above a whisper. We can't let her win. We can't let what she did to us define who we are. He nodded, his jaw tightening. We won't, but it's going to take time. And it would. It would take time for us to heal, for the scars left by this trauma to fade. For me to stop checking the locks on every door at night, for Adam to stop waking up in the middle of the night, searching for my baby, just to make sure she was still there, safe in her crib. In the following weeks, the aftermath of Karen's arrest became the talk of the town. The HOA was forced to distance itself from her, and many in the community began to question the organization's role in allowing someone like Karen to hold power. News outlets picked up the story, and local headlines were filled with the shocking details of her actions. But as much as the town wanted to move on, it wasn't so easy for us. I couldn't just forget what had happened, and neither could Adam. We started therapy soon after, both individually and together. The strain of everything that had happened had taken its toll on our marriage, our mental health, and our ability to trust others. But we were trying to rebuild. For our daughter. For each other. One of the hardest things I've had to come to terms with is the way I had felt betrayed by someone I had trusted. Karen's obsession had been so deep that it had twisted everything around her. And it wasn't just a simple matter of taking a child. It was a complete violation of everything I stood for as a mother. My job was to protect my child, to keep her safe, and yet I had let someone like Karen into our lives. The weight of that guilt would linger. It wasn't something I could easily shake off. But I knew that healing would come in its own time, that we would both find peace again, even if it took longer than we'd hoped. In the end, we chose to focus on what we could control. We were still a family. We still had our daughter, and no matter how much we had been through, nothing would ever take that away from us. I had learned a hard lesson in trust and in the dangers that lurked in places we least expected. But through it all, I had learned that love, the kind of love that comes from a mother for her child, would always find a way to push through the darkness. And no matter how many people like Karen tried to tear us apart, that love would be unbreakable. As I looked down at my daughter, still peacefully asleep in my arms, I knew that our family would come out of this stronger. There would be challenges ahead. There always are, but we would face them together. And as long as I had my family by my side, I knew we could endure anything. Thank you for taking this journey with me. I know this story was difficult to hear, but it's one that needed to be told. If you've learned anything from this, it's how important it is to trust your instincts and to be aware of the people around you. Sometimes, the people we think we can trust may have hidden motives, and we need to protect our loved ones at all costs. If you found this story impactful, please share it. Let's raise awareness about the dangers that can lurk in our own communities. Protecting our families starts with staying informed and looking out for each other. And don't forget to leave a comment below. Have you ever experienced something that made you question who you could trust? I want to hear your stories. Most importantly, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any of our future content. Remember, we're in this together, and together we can create a safer, more aware world. Stay vigilant, stay strong, and keep fighting for your loved ones.